This is Alissa.
And this is Caroline. Welcome to MedSurg Moments, the AMSM podcast.
This podcast is an engaging look at the lives of and surrounding medical surgical nurses.
We are proud medical surgical nurses just like you, sharing our stories, insights, and experiences to support you in your nursing journey.
All right. Well, welcome to this episode of MedSurg Moments. Unfortunately, Parker couldn't be with us today, but we are really excited to have two of our new guest co-hosts, Laura and Maritess, with us. Ladies, why don't you take a moment and tell us about yourselves?
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura. I have been a med-surg nurse for almost 15 years. Started on a medical oncology floor, and I held just about every position you can think of on that floor. Transitioned into leadership and management, and a few years ago left that for nursing education. So I'm currently an oncology educator.
Awesome. And Maritess, what about you?
Hi, I'm very happy to be here today. And my name is Maritess. I am currently in a leadership role in one of the healthcare systems here in South Florida. Currently, I am in a leadership role here in one of the healthcare systems here in South Florida. I've been a med-surg nurse for about 16 years, and I'm very happy that I'll be here with you all today. I like small talks. I like sharing my experiences and my stories, especially with new nurses and nurses who are currently learning their role in their nursing career.
Laura, what kinds of things do you do for fun?
My husband and I like to go to concerts and festivals and things like that. We enjoy craft beer and live music and art shows and things like that. We're in Texas, so we travel around to different little towns near our home and kind of visit those kinds of places. And we like unique venues and places where we can people watch and, enjoy being together and watching what's happening.
That's awesome. What about you, Maritess? What do you do for fun?
I love to travel, me and my family. I have 5 kids, and so traveling can be stressful, but we've learned the art of traveling with style, I would say. We always have our travel bags already. Every time we're done with one travel, we have one bag all set to go. Like we go to Disney, okay, pack that bag, pick that bag for Disney. Or if you want to go to the beach, pick up that bag for a beach vacation. Even like small road trips, that's the way to go.
Maritess, I'm a big Disney fan myself. Do you like Disney World, Disneyland? Have you been to any of the other Disney parks around the world, I should say?
Unfortunately, I've only been to one Disney park, so that's Disney World here in Florida.
Right.
But I would love to visit the other parks. I'll tell you, in one year, I would say 2016, we visited Disney World for more than 35 times. So that's how
that's what you do. That's what you do, right? Absolutely. Yeah. You put that annual pass to good use, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Well, awesome. It is so nice to get to know you guys a little bit more. Caroline, what's new with you?
Well, big changes in the Ashman camp. I decided after our daughter got married earlier on in the year that as much as we had loved Florida and wanted to move to Florida and make plans for retirement, it just didn't work out the way we had hoped. So we came back to what we know and love, and we are now back in Georgia, in the metro area in Gwinnett County, Georgia, about 40 miles northeast of Atlanta, and switched gears just a little bit, working as a clinical manager at the facility that I came from. That used to be owned by HCA, but now is owned by Piedmont Healthcare, who I used to work for when I first moved to Georgia. So very much come full circle. Staying with my very good friend in her beautiful home and coming to you from her basement currently. But my husband and I realize it's for the best, and he's getting settled in his new job as well. And so next time, maybe we'll be in our new home. We bought a house and we're just waiting for that to all come to fruition now. So very busy in the Ashman household lately.
Oh, yeah. Big transition. It sounds like new job, new house, new state. But you're closer to family now, right?
Our youngest has stayed in Tampa. Oldest is in Alabama. So we're kind of in the middle of both of them. And Alissa, what's been going on in your world? What updates do you have?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's going on is we are getting ready to drive my son to college next week. And he's going early. He's 17. This should be his senior year, but he decided to graduate early. And it was last year that he came to us and had this goal to graduate early and get into college and do this diesel mechanic program. And he literally did it all. And we're off. We're driving him to the dorms next weekend. And I'm so proud of him. I'm so excited for him. And he's my baby. So we're going to be empty nesters. So it's happening.
Yeah, it does happen. You cannot stop it, and you will get through it, and you'll have a whole new world open up to you, and you will see your son grow and blossom, as children tend to do. As much as we want to keep him under our wing and keep him close to home, that's what happens. You raise him right, you give him the wings, and off they fly. So good luck with that.
He's a little anxious about moving out. I mean, moving out is kind of a big deal at 17. So I think that's his biggest. Yeah. He's excited about school. He's excited about that adventure, but kind of being so far away from mom and dad, I think, is what's the most nerve-wracking.
And where is he going to school again?
Laramie, Wyoming, which is about 6 hours away. So,
oh, wow.
But he'll be in a dorm with other
Yeah,
students.
He'll be in the dorms. Yeah. Going to Wyotech for diesel mechanics. So very excited.
Well, we can't wait to hear about how well he does in the first few weeks on our next podcast.
I know, right? We'll find out. We will have just dropped him off.
He's going to do just fine. And so will you.
I hope so. All right. Well, why don't we get to what we're here to talk about, which is caring for a dying patient. I'm sure we all have very different and very similar experiences with how to care for a dying patient. Does anyone have a place they want to jump off from?
I can certainly kick off by saying this is one of the events when you are a nurse that you never forget. We can probably all think back to the first time we had someone pass away and remember how that made us all feel and how much of a connection we had made with that patient and their family, which further impacts the emotional aspect of it all. I think one of the things that was hardest for me was to understand that, yes, a loved one had just passed away and a family are grieving, but things must be done. A body must be prepared for the funeral home. We cannot let the family linger for hours and hours because the ER is full and we need a bed. And the factual day-to-day operations kind of overshadowed a little bit the fact that everyone was grieving. I thought it was really important when facilities had something other than the cold clinical morgue to place the body, but a chapel of rest or some kind of place where the family could at least sit with the body until they were moved to wherever their final resting place would be. So that was kind of hard for me at first. I couldn't understand why the supervisor was saying that patient's still in the bed. Why are they still in the bed? You have to get rid of the patient. My goodness gracious, how cold and callous that sounded. That was probably the hardest thing for me. The first death that I experienced was very soon in my nursing career. So I had not personally experienced anything like this. And so very profound and something I never forgot along the way.
I think you're right. I think that helping us recount that first patient really helps newer nurses understand what they're feeling right after that patient passes away, especially if it's a brand new resident or they're a brand new nurse and it happens early in their career. It's important to help them debrief after that whole situation has happened. We've got to take time to reflect, because even if they put on that brave face and they go home, if they don't connect with that grief and all those feelings that they have, they could really end up burning out a lot quicker than we want them to. So it's important to encourage them to find a way, whether that's with their preceptor or with a friend or with a mentor, but they need to talk about it, talk through the whole entire situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing that we always do debriefs without even thinking when we have emergencies like codes. But when someone passes away, we oftentimes just completely overlook the fact that everybody is impacted by it. And time should definitely be set aside to recall what happened and how everyone felt and how you just kind of brush it off and pick it up and carry on with the rest of your shift. You have other patients that are still out there. So it's a very delicate balance for sure, wanting to be sensitive and respectful, but also realizing, okay, I have other patients now and a shift to finish up. And there's a lot of emotions that go through people's heads, I think. And so your point is really a good one, I think, Laura, because it's so true. We don't give ourselves time to process what's going on.
Yeah, and you're right, too. There are things that need to be done. If you've got a full load of patients, you do have other responsibilities that you kind of need to put your effort in. But you also go through all of those emotions like, did I do something wrong? What led up to this? Was there something else I could have done? Should I have called some help in sooner? Should I have called a provider? All of those things are still swimming in their head right after it happens. And they need to talk through that. But you're right. They do have to focus on their other responsibilities and get through that shift. But hopefully they've got a good manager or team around them to recognize that, to stop and say, hey, are you okay?
I think for me, the first patient that I ever lost on shift, I was an intern. So I was still a nursing student doing paid internship learning. And I think the hardest part for me was that for the majority of the shift, we were doing everything we could for this patient. And then there was the shift where the patient's like, okay, I'm going on palliative care. And so now we're not doing anything. And there is not a good process for helping nurses make that transition. There's not a good education process for helping nurses understand that transition or make that mental and emotional switch, because it's really difficult to go from life-saving measures to just comfort measures. It's really difficult to then watch your patient, what you feel like is suffering, even though it's a totally normal dying process. And so it feels like there's a gap in knowledge about the entire death and dying process and what is normal once a patient decides to go into comfort care, what we should expect to see as the nurse as normal progression of the dying process, and then how we can mitigate that and make it easier and more comfortable where we're treating pain or treating dyspnea or secretions or all that kind of stuff. But then we can also educate the family and feel comfortable and confident that, yes, this dyspnea is normal with where they're at with their dyspnea. This is what we project or statistics show that they're within 16 to 24 hours of their death or whatever, right? Having that knowledge and having that education, I think, as a bedside nurse would make me feel more comfortable in this process. But in that time, I had nothing. And not only did I have no education or knowledge, I was then being handed the morphine syringe to be pushing the morphine while we start taking this patient off their O2. I was so conflicted because I had no idea what was going on. But this was a great learning experience, is what everyone's telling me. What a great learning experience. Come in here and see how this is done. And this is a patient you've been working with all day. Come in here and see how it's done. And really, it was so confusing. I wouldn't say traumatic, but it took a long time for me to understand and put those pieces together and figure out what happened. Especially because when the patient finally passed away, it was like shift change and they were like, you can go. But you don't need to have any of those closure moments that nurses actually do get when they work with the family and when they clean the patient and prepare them to go down to the morgue and stuff like that. Instead, they were like, oh, you don't have to stay here and intern. I have to do the paperwork. I have to do the charting. I have to work with the family. I have to do all that. But you're a student. You can go. I left so confused about everything that had just happened that day.
I appreciate you sharing your first experience, because when I had that experience with the patient, and when you mentioned you saw there was a morphine order, me being an international nurse, I came here as an immigrant nurse. And in our country, prior to coming here in the United States, we are never allowed to give morphine. And so when I saw that, my heart sank. I know what's going to happen. I definitely know what I need to anticipate. This is more of preparing myself of what I need to see, what is going to happen. I need to prepare myself to make sure that the family members are aware this is what's going to happen to their loved one. One of my first patients was a hospice patient, shared with me, Tess, it's really okay. And what that means is that when I was giving morphine to her, she can see my tears falling. She can actually feel that I wasn't really made to end the life. I am here to care for a patient. I am here to take care of you, to prolong your life, but that's not my choice to make. And so when I see a patient who is in that situation, I would always remember that statement. It's okay. It is not my decision to make, but this is a decision of the patient, and we all need to respect that.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Maritess. You gave a beautiful recount of how impactful this is because of cultural differences. I remember when my father-in-law was near the end of his life, fighting for every breath. He was skinny. He couldn't eat because he got so short of breath. And he had made it very clear that he didn't want to be resuscitated should he stop breathing. My husband and I were called emergently to England to see him, and we were almost shocked that he had not been put on a morphine infusion. It was a very awkward and unpleasant conversation between the doctors and us, and we were made to feel that we were the criminals here asking for morphine to hasten my father-in-law's passing. We were trying to look at it from the humane perspective. And then, of course, you get all the ethical dilemma that comes into place in that we all know morphine's a wonderful analgesic, but we also know it suppresses the respiratory system. And are we facilitating something that we should just leave well alone and let nature take its course? But to see him in that bed fighting for every last breath. You know, we live in a society where if this is one of our animals, we wouldn't hesitate to take them to the vet and help them out of their misery. But with an adult, of course, it's a completely different perspective. And I don't know what words of advice or solace we can give to someone who advocates for their family members by wanting to lessen their pain and make their passing more comfortable. I don't know what anyone else thinks of that along the way. It's certainly, in my mind, not an inhumane thing to do when everyone is on the same page with it. And most importantly, when the patient has already said, this is what I want to happen.
I often say when I'm teaching about hospice and palliative care that that's one of the most difficult things for nurses to do, is to transition from being someone who saves lives to someone that's helping someone die. It's a really hard transition to make. But if you can really do what you said and look at it from that patient's perspective, if they have made that choice, they have decided that living with whatever illness or condition that they have is not what they want to do, and they want to pass peacefully or pass without pain or discomfort, and they don't want their families to see them going through that. You make that decision to do what the patient wants within your scope of practice. Obviously, we don't want to go overboard or overstep our bounds or our license, but we do want to do what we can to make them comfortable.
Yeah, I would agree. If our med-surg nurses out there that are struggling to do care with patients who are dying or have not had this experience, I think my advice to them would become familiar with the dying process so that you're more familiar with what to expect. If your patient is taking a difficult road to death, which includes like hallucinations, mumbling and delirium and seizures and all that stuff, versus the more normal road of becoming lethargic and comatose. There are symptom management things that can be done to help your patient. There are things that we can do just in general for symptom management while a patient is passing away, because most common end of life symptoms include pain and dyspnea and secretion control. And so if you become familiar with the process of dying, you will feel more confident and comfortable taking care of that patient and then being an ally to a patient's family. You'll feel more comfortable guiding them and doing that education that we often do at the bedside. When you're working with family members that may be struggling, I think the best thing to do is to just listen. You really are there to advocate for the patient. And while it's important to listen and validate how families are feeling, you're a patient advocate.
I grew up as a nurse on an oncology floor, so we had our share of patients that chose hospice or palliative care. And I remember it so clearly. I had a patient that was second time cancer. Cancer had come back. She had done a round of chemo and she didn't want any more chemo. She was ready to move into hospice and palliative care. But her daughters were absolutely not even thinking about it. They were answering the questions that the doctors were asking. The doctor was ready to go forward with another round of chemo, and they were ready to do it. And I just noticed that my patient would change when the family members left. And so she told me that she was ready to give up the chemo before she told her family members. And that was a difficult conversation. So I had to sit on the bed with her and hold her hand while we explained that to her daughters. It was emotional. We were all crying, but in the end, they listened to their mom. The patient is the one that gets to make that decision, not the family members. But it's not always easy. It's not always easy.
I agree. It's not an easy path for both the patient and the family members, the nurses. I do wonder, do you have a palliative care team in your facilities? Because I think they are very instrumental in making sure that if you are a new nurse in the unit or you haven't experienced any of these, you need to really reach out to your palliative team who are experts in handling situations like this. I certainly wanted to share that our palliative team, they have a lot of not just motivation and encouragement that they provide to family members, but they also help explain the whole process. You know, sometimes if we explain, I would speak for myself, if I'm the nurse who would be explaining to the family members, they would think, who are you to say what my mom or my dad would want? So hearing that from a third party, from another team member would probably help. And like I said, they use the right words, they use the right verbiage to explain what is really going on and what is really happening. And again, respecting what the patient really wants in this situation.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really great point of your palliative care team. Most hospitals do have a team like that, and we definitely want to utilize the resources that we have. I know my facility does have an amazing palliative care team that does come and support the nurses at the bedside and the patients. And in fact, when I reflect back on the situation I was in, it was that meeting with palliative care that once the patient was like, yep, I'm in, they were like, cool, let's do this. And it was like in my memory, it felt like everything happened in like 5 minutes. I'm confident it didn't, but that's how it felt. But yes, those palliative care teams are amazing. I was not their priority to give education to on what was happening. I was the student there, but you're absolutely correct. They are a resource for not only the patient, but also the family. They do have the right words. They do have the knowledge and education to bring comfort to that family. So I think that's a great resource. We are reaching the end of our time. Any final thoughts about caring for the dying patient?
It's important to remember that we don't intend to not do the right things or say the right things or act in the right way. This is not something that we typically deal with every day. And so it's okay to feel upset and isolated and emotional. Many a nurse along the way has said, oh, I said this to the family. I said that to the family. I really shouldn't have said that, but I didn't know what else to say. I felt like I had to say something. Silence is a very powerful emotion. And sometimes people just need to be quiet. They just need to be silent. They just need to have time to reflect. So I think that's a good takeaway. There's no question that we don't deal with these situations with compassion and professionalism, but being mindful of there's no such thing as saying the right or wrong thing in these situations. Learn from the experience in as much as different cultures, different beliefs, different rituals can make the whole sad event of dealing with the patient that's dying to be meaningful, and you come away understanding why certain things are done because of ceremonial, traditional aspects of someone that's dying.
Awesome. On that note, thank you guys so much for being here today. Especially want to thank our guest hosts for joining us, Laura and Maritess. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.
We look forward to connecting with you on our next episode of MedSurg Moments, the AMSN podcast. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions, topic ideas, and feedback via our official MedSurg Moments email address, amsnpod@amsn.org. That's amsnpod@amsn.org.
We'd also like to remind you to become a member of AMSN or renew your membership at www.amsn.org. You'll receive lots of cool benefits and perks, such as discounted pricing on the annual convention and continuing education.
We encourage you to help us spread the word and subscribe to MedSurg Moments podcast via your smartphone podcast app to receive notifications of future episodes. Please be sure to leave us a review and recommend MedSurg Moments wherever you get your podcasts to help us reach even more listeners.
We invite you to join the conversation by sharing your ideas and questions on AMSN's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter pages. And don't forget to add #MedSurgMoments to your post. Simply enter AMSN in the search field on any of these social media platforms to connect with us.
The content within the MedSurg Moments podcast represents the views, thoughts, and opinions of the co-hosts and may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses.
Until next time, I'm Caroline.
I'm Alissa, and always remember, MedSurg Moments is a moment in our lives, a moment in our MedSurg careers that makes a huge difference.